Jamusu?
Yeah.
Jamusu. And aloha.
Hey.
From Cambodia.
I'm Uriah.
To Hawaii.
Hey. One more time.
Am I being too cheesy?
Well, no, because I was like, I'm Uriah, and you're like, aloha. We'll have 4 martinis. It's 9 p.m. over here.
Okay, so don't go that go with your thing.
No, it's okay.
I think we should leave this all in.
Oh yeah, just for our adoring audience.
Yeah, like we should just be real with you. It is 9 p.m.
It's true.
9 p.m., 9 months pregnant, baby mama, been pregnant for way too long. But we are here because we're super excited to talk with you about our favorite thing, missions.
Missions.
I'm Naomi.
I'm Uriah. And yeah, we're the Lifers. And we're excited to share with you guys. Like Naomi said, it really is our favorite subject. It's what our entire lives go towards. It's what we have conversations about at night. Not necessarily what you maybe think of as the subject of missions. We don't just sit in bed at night and say, so about missions. But definitely the idea of discipling every nation, making disciples of every nation, and the process, it's a lot like parenting, which we're learning now with our first daughter just coming up on a year, and like Naomi said, just about to give birth to our second daughter. But yeah, what we do and have done off and on for the last 17 years now is very much in line with what we're going to be teaching on this week, which is missions. So
yeah, so we have a lot of passion for this subject. A lot of passion that comes from the joy and excitement of the privilege it is to partner with God's heart in missions. We also have a lot of passion for mistakes that we've made and we've seen made. And like Uriah said, when we say that we talk about missions a lot, and I mean, just a few minutes ago before we were filming this, our conversation about missions may have included phrases like, well, maybe I don't want those moron missionaries to come here, and maybe we don't need them. So we're going to try to be real with you, one, so that this can stay as interesting as possible.
Let me just say that it was Naomi who said that they were morons.
No way. No way. Let's be honest. We know where that really came from. And if you don't know yet, you'll definitely know by the end of this, our very first session. So thank you for being here with us.
Keeping it real this one today. Neighbors.
So we'd love to just jump in and tell you a little bit about ourselves to kind of frame the setting.
Do you want to unpack the moron missionaries first?
No, I think it's a good cliffhanger. Stay tuned.
You will figure
Don't
out.
fall
Don't
asleep.
be a moron. Don't be. We call them Steves.
Yeah.
Don't be Steve. This is the. We'll get there.
We'll get there.
Day
And
3.
if there's any Steves in the class, we haven't got to the class list yet.
If you're a Steve, it's we have nothing against Steves. It's just a random name we chose for people who make.
It's like the missionary version of Karens, you know,
Karens.
like if you've seen memes and stuff about. Like,
also, if you are
mean
Karen,
ladies.
we love you.
We
Karens.
also love you.
We've got
and
good
we're really
friends.
sorry that we did not choose that name. So we'll tell you a little bit about ourselves that will help you maybe understand us a little bit better and hopefully like us a little bit.
It's not about us, it's about Jesus.
Yes.
But we do really like it, people like us too. So, and yeah, the reason we introduce ourselves and want you guys to get to know us is hopefully you'll be able to like and connect with us, and which is a lame situation. COVID forces us to not be there with you guys. We love getting to know each person who we're in the classroom with. And we know that each of you guys have your own unique story. And so day 1, we want to introduce ourselves so that part of it is so that you'll like us and connect with us. And a part of it is so that you'll understand that we are very much not much different than you guys. Mm-hmm. And we are very different from one another, and in some ways different from you guys. But we feel that, especially with our backgrounds, each one of us carries kind of a certain kind of we call it 4.0s and felons. So we see in the church and in Christianity and in the world in general, one of the easiest ways to break down is just kind of, there's Enneagram, there's Myers-Briggs, there's disc test.
All sorts of personalities or ways that you could categorize people.
And we love all of those. But simply put, usually we've seen people are kind of in one of two categories, meaning one, you grew up a little bit more in a healthy environment, or at least you made better choices in life. And then the other one, you maybe grew up in a little bit of a rougher environment, maybe a single parent home, and or both parent home, but maybe you made less great choices. And so we'll talk to you guys during today, introduce ourselves. But before we get into that, I maybe can just lay out the week to you guys, so you'll understand a little bit. By the way, Naomi's the one who has made poor choices in her life. Let me just make that really clear, okay? She's the felon.
But the heroin addiction is finally under control, been delivered by the grace of God. You'll hear my whole testimony in a few minutes. Shooting
up dope between her toes. It's pretty bad. No, just joking.
Just joking.
Neither one of us are that bad. If you were shooting up dope between your toes, though, we also love you too. And Steve and Karen. Okay, so let's see. This week, layout. So, we think that you're going to miss out a little bit on the idea of having a live speaker. And so we've asked our kind of partners in not crime, partners in leadership, missions here on the base, Lauren and Connor, the Kings. They are going to be staffing the January DTS and possibly are going to be with you guys during this week, pending California. Possibly they might be in California. So either way, you will either live stream or have in-class lectures half the day with Connor and Lauren. They'll be able to unpack kind of what each day's topic a little bit, make it practical for you guys, just like what it looks like practically in our day-to-day lives here in Cambodia, as well as bring a perspective for you guys. Naomi and I recognize we both did our DTS in 2003, so
we're kind of old.
Compared to most of you guys, I think. Although, also, if you're an older person in the DTS,
then we're super young, like you. Youth with a mission.
Yay. But Lauren and Connor have been enrolling. I staffed their DTS in 2015, so almost coming up on 6 years now. So they're a little more closer to your age and a little more closer in what you could maybe expect from a missions experience. So we will do these videos. They'll be hopefully an hour to an hour and a half each, and have some Q&A time. And then Connor and Lauren are going to unpack, make it practical, and bring perspective to the day's teaching, as well as give their own kind of experience and opinion into each topic. And then so day one, which is today, we're going to talk about who does missions. And so we'll unpack our stories, and basically the answer, if you go on a cheat, who does missions?
Spoiler alert.
Everybody. We are all called to do missions. You can write this one down. There are 3 types of Christians. Are you ready for this? Senders, goers, and the disobedient. So, just hopefully a little conviction in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Fall on you guys. No, we really believe that everyone, Matthew 28:18 says that, go therefore, all authority has been given to me. The last thing Jesus said to his church, go therefore, make disciples of every nation. And so we believe the last thing Jesus gave to the church was a missions mandate to preach the gospel. And so, but sometimes we might excuse ourselves based upon our personality type, oh, I'm quiet,
or experiences or our past or things that we've gone through.
Yeah. And so what we want to do is unpack for you a little bit about our journey, our story, and hopefully you'll be able to relate with either one of us. And so that's going to be day one, is who does God call into missions? And day two, we'll go into the why. Any of you guys who have ever seen Simon Sinek, Start with the Why? Great YouTube talk if you ever want to see a really good appeal to how to communicate effectively. But it's really important before we get into the subject that you understand, one, who, so you are called to do missions, then you know why. Because if you don't know why, you're not going to care about the next days, which is going to be how, which is going to be what, like how you do it, what you do, and then when and where. We'll wrap up at the end of the week with real practical application. So hopefully this whole week is going to be a cohesive framework for you to kind of get in line with being what we really hope and believe you're all going to be: lifelong, committed, missionally engaged with preaching the gospel till the last person on earth has heard and knows the love of Jesus Christ. So that's a little bit of the breakdown. With that said, I think we can get into our introduction. So I'll have Naomi kick us off with a little bit about her background and how she got clean from heroin.
So do you want me to explain about the 4.0 and the felon, or?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
okay.
go ahead.
So Uriah began to go into it. That it actually happened a few years ago, and Uriah was sitting with the meeting, and it was actually somebody else who made the comment, right? Mm-hmm. That as they looked around the room in one of the YWAM staff meetings, they said, "Wow, you know." And it was in the Cambodian language, which we call Khmer, and so there were different terms used. But basically, wow, the room kind of divides into the really good people and then kind of the bad people. And so in English, particularly in American vernacular, we've termed, because it kind of has a rhymey, go-together way, the 4.0 and the felon. So for those of you who are ESL or are not familiar with these terms, we're using them to kind of generally classify. And yes, we're working with stereotypes. There will be, this is not, we had a whole conversation earlier today about whether this was a biblical principle.
Not a theology.
It's not a theology. These are observations that we've made and just some things that we want to share from our story, our marriage. And as we've talked about it and gone through our journey, we've found that people do generally fall or identify or find themselves within these two things, and often will use these reasons as excuses. And ironically, no matter where you fall, people always find a way to use that as the excuse for why they should not be a missionary, or they couldn't or wouldn't be a good one. And so we just want to diffuse some of those myths and those excuses right now, and share from our perspective and our stories. So the 4.0s is from the American educational system, which ranks as you get your letter grades. And basically the 4.0 is the highest perfect mark. It means that in every class you're attending, you are getting the maximum number of points. You are just excellent, top of your class. And so this group of people will kind of describe some of the characteristics that we've seen from them. But as Uriah kind of shared earlier, we often see that they come from good families. They had both of their parents, probably even grew up in the church. Maybe they were, do you know what a PK is? A pastor's kid. Or maybe they grew up just coming to know about God at a really young age. And so I'll go ahead and I'll explain that a little bit more, because it is my testimony. And so that is me, my parents. My dad was a pastor. My mom actually was in YWAM before they got married. She actually went out for my dad was an assistant pastor at this church, and she went out as a missionary with YWAM, helped pioneer the first YWAM base in Japan. It's still there and going strong. And so wonderful legacy. She came back from the mission field, married my dad. The church planted. They're in Hawaii. I was born and raised in Hawaii. And we stayed very closely affiliated with YWAM. And so I grew up doing the kids programs for YWAM. We call them King's Kids. And just received Jesus when I was 4 years old and was baptized when I was 7, and just loved Jesus and was blessed with a wonderful home environment, wonderful Christian parents, and this YWAM environment. All of my best friends were all in YWAM Kids. We'd run around the YWAM base together, and I learned, Joy Dawson's steps of intercession, which you obviously know by now, at a very young age. And we would do missions trips at least once or twice a year. And so at the age of 8 years old particularly, I was having my quiet time by myself, and I heard God speak to me about being a missionary. And I heard God say, go and tell the children in Chad, Africa, Jesus loves them. And so I went to my mom. I didn't know where this country was, and I said, God told me that I'm going to go to Chad, Africa. Can you help me find it on a map? And we looked, found it in the center of Africa. And so from the time I was 8 years old, I would tell everyone, when I grow up, I'm going to be a missionary to Chad, Africa. And that just became a huge part of my life, and I stayed with it. I mean, my grandparents used to say, oh, you'll change, and other people said, oh, I'm sure you'll come up with other ideas about what you want to do. Every child thinks they're going to do 5 different things by the time. But sure enough, I finished school and went and I did my DTS. Uriah and I actually did our DTS the same time. However, he came to my hometown, did his in Honolulu, Hawaii, and because I wanted to leave and get a new experience, I went to Perth, Australia. So I did my DTS in 2003 in Perth, Australia. And I just was on track to go to Chad, Africa, and be a missionary with my life. And so I was passionate about it. I love maps. I love travel. I love countries. I love culture. I knew it was a French-speaking country, so I began to learn a little bit of French. After my DTS, I went back to finish university. I have a degree in education. I also have a degree in biblical studies and went through the process to be an ordained minister. And just with all of this equipping, as I finished university and prayed about what God had, I felt God say, this is the time. And so in 2007, I moved to Chad, Africa, and served with YWAM there, led DTS, helped pioneer like a children's ministry and a clinic that worked with nutrition and malnourished children in the community. Also started a primary school or an elementary school, as my background is in education, that then became a teacher training center to start other schools. And so after I was there in Chad for 5 years, we turned the school over to locals. We raised up other leaders that were taking over the DTS, and the base was doing well. And so I felt like the Lord said my time there in Chad was finished. I moved on. My parents had actually moved to Malaysia while I was in university with Youth with a Mission, with YWAM. And so while I was there visiting them, I became familiar with the refugee situation of Burmese, or refugees from the country of Burma or Myanmar. And YWAM was wanting to start a work for the children there in Malaysia for these refugee children, because there was nothing for them available. So I said, oh, I have this education experience, and so ended up helping start a school for refugee children in Malaysia. Was there for a couple of years. Incredible favor with the Lord. Was recognized by UNHCR, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, and received a commendation and full funding for the school. And I just fell in love with these Burmese people, and so actually after a couple of years ended up moving to Myanmar to work with YWAM there in Myanmar, or Burma, where I started another school or training center that then started schools in villages where there was no schools. And so at this time, after I had been there for about 4 years, when I was leading a team from Myanmar to a YWAM conference here in Cambodia. And as we crossed the border, we went from Myanmar, flew to Thailand, and from Thailand crossed into Cambodia. At the border, there was this tall, handsome man speaking the local language fluently. And he was my missionary Prince Charming, and man of my dreams. And so that is how Uriah and I met. And last year we got married and blessed with a baby right away. And so yeah, our daughter, by the time you watch this, she will almost be 1, and we will have our second already. I'm pregnant now, but by the time you're watching this, because she'll be born in 10 days, we will already have her. So maybe when we do our live session, you'll get to meet our second daughter as well as our first. So that is my version. So I'll break it down a little bit more in detail, but you kind of start to get the idea of the 4.0. I got good grades in school. I'm from a wonderful family. I've loved Jesus since I was little and had this purpose and plan for my life, and have made a lot of mistakes. We're going to talk about the weaknesses of this 4.0, or the good one, because there's definitely a lot of weaknesses and a lot of reasons that I have often felt unqualified to be a missionary. But I'll let Uriah share a little bit of his story, and we'll come back to that in our next part.
I think we'll take a little break. 7 minutes left?
Yeah.
Okay, well then, my video camera only records 30 minutes, so we're gonna try to make it 30-minute snips. Obviously, ideally, we would be able to turn this into a cool vlog, but I just don't think we got the bandwidth to edit all the videos. But yeah, I just want to highlight when I heard what Naomi had done throughout her life, I was like, this girl's way too good to be real. But it is definitely the real thing. And yeah, coming up on our second year of marriage, it has been the best almost 2 years of my entire life, without a doubt. And
mine too.
Which one of the things we'll talk about is the unique partnership that can happen when you see kind of a person with kind of a 4.0 background like Naomi has shared with you, just where, yeah, like Naomi is a bastion of integrity and of moral fortitude and like commitment to what is right. And it's amazing. And so she has a tremendous capacity to love and to really support and work alongside of me super well, just with my kind of charismatic and a little bit more colorful personality. So but we find it works super well together, and so we'll talk about that. But let's take one quick break, and then I'll share with you a little bit about my background, and then we'll go into a little bit of a teaching. Let's see. I grew up, my mom and dad were saved out of the Jesus movement. Like, basically my parents were total hippies. And I mean, my mom was like, I have a picture of her like smoking pot, like with my brother being pregnant, and like they were very free spirited and just hippies, you know what I mean? Like, and so I don't have a whole legacy of spiritual titans by any means in my family. And so my mom became a Christian right before having me. I was the third child. And eventually her and my father separated after my dad really couldn't kind of adhere to a lot of the biblical teachings and disagreed with the faith. And so they had a lot of disagreements over religion and other things. My dad was a pretty big drinker and had a lot of other issues as well, of which I have been blessed with some similar struggles throughout my life. And but a lot of blessings as well. My father also like founded a hippie commune and was very charismatic and was very much a leader in his own way. Sadly though, his era was fraught with opportunities to lead kind of in the wrong areas, the wrong direction. Similarly, growing up with my mom being a single mother and just kind of a really difficult upbringing. Most of my childhood up until I was 7, my mom was single. She remarried to my stepdad. And I mean, all marriages are work. Even Naomi and I, it's not perfect. We do have things to work through as well and areas to grow in all the time. But things were pretty difficult for my mother and stepfather, particularly at first. And so that just created an environment where, for me, home wasn't a place where I wanted to be at. And so the opportunities that were presented to me as a young person to avoid going home were to go and drink with my older friends. So I quickly got into drugs and alcohol around the age of 11. And then by 12, I was using drugs pretty regularly, just smoking pot and drinking. The harder drugs didn't come until like 13, 14, 15, I started getting into prescription medication. I'm sure there's some of you guys. So yeah, I know that in every DTS, and I think this is one of the strengths of DTS is that you have a mix of 4.0s and felons.
Which for the ESL, the felon is?
So for the felons are guys who went to jail.
Which again, we're using this term just kind of to describe the opposite of the goodies at school. So
the bad kids.
You may have not literally gone to jail.
But I did actually literally get arrested multiple times. I actually did my DTS while I was on probation for assault. This is a true story. I dropped out of high school my senior year under investigation for manufacturing anabolic steroids currently, while being on probation for assault. And but I had this awesome conversion experience in the midst of all the chaos and craziness, and met Jesus and wanted to know him more and really wanted to see if he was real. And I had grown up, my mom had brought me to church and I had read the Bible, but there were so many questions and so many things that didn't make sense. And to be honest, I had tried Christianity out several times and made commitments to follow Jesus, but for me it was really, really difficult to follow through on that commitment. And that was really frustrating and kind of disillusioning for me, because I wanted to be a Christian. I wanted to be a 4.0. I wanted to be a good kid. And it seemed like no matter how much I committed, or no matter how intense the experience I had with Jesus at summer camp or at a youth service or whatever, inevitably a week would go by and I would go get drunk with my friends again. And so I don't know if some of you guys maybe have same-sex attraction issues, or tendencies to chemical dependence, or emotional, psychological issues that you're wrestling with, but sometimes we experience trauma in our life, or just are biologically kind of out of sync, whether that's psychologically or emotionally or sexually or chemically, and it can cause some real serious barriers to us experiencing the freedom that we so desire within Christ. And so when I came to my DTS, it was very much out of this background of, having gone to church. My mom did her best. She's one of my best friends. We talked to her this morning. She's an awesome woman. And my stepdad's one of our supporters, and he's a good friend, and we love him to death. And so no disrespect to them. They had their own things that they were working through. And even my father, before he passed away, I got to spend time with him and really just connect and say, I love you, Dad, and I don't judge you. Each person has their own journey and their own path. And I'm sure many of you guys have gone on a bit of a journey of forgiving and releasing and getting freedom from that. But for those of us who kind of grew up in that, I'm sure you and your DTS, like I and my DTS, are experiencing some real hopeful. I really believe that. I know it's a great DTS. We love Eleanor. We love your guys' staff, Snydecki and Hannah and everyone. You guys are awesome. You guys are in great hands. Sean is the man. And you guys have great people around you and great teachers. And so we're believing that God is bringing great levels of freedom to your life like never before. But I just want to share from my experience and perspective that it's a journey, you guys. It's a journey, and salvation isn't a one-time thing. It's a process, and forgiveness, it's a process, and you got to make that decision daily. And so my DTS radically saved, and I definitely experienced a level of freedom in my life. And for the next 6 years, I went for Jesus, like Paul, persecuting the church before, And once I experienced the goodness of God, I went full on. And so for the first 6 years after my DTS, I'm very involved in pioneering works in Cambodia, and saw incredible fruit, incredible favor. Was able to start an English school in Phnom Penh. Eventually helped to start a YWAM base that's still running in the province of Kampong Cham, and then partnered with a group called Christian Missionary Alliance to help start a rural Bible college that's training up rural church planners. That's also still running, and we meet young people all over the place who have been discipled and trained in that Bible college. So it's really encouraging to this day. So lots of fruit from those 6 years. And during around that time, though, I began struggling with my own internal issues again from the past, particularly around the area of drinking. And I began thinking, I might be an alcoholic. I might have a serious problem. It wasn't that I was like going out and getting drunk all the time, but I just sneak a few beers, have a few beers, every now and again, every few months, or meet with my Christian buddies. But I noticed I drank more than most of my Christian friends, and more often. And it began to be a little bit difficult. And I had signed a contract that last year that I wouldn't drink for the year, and I was breaking it over and over again. And that, coupled with one of my mentors, who also was a family friend of Naomi's from Hawaii, got cancer. And there were several things that happened that began to cause me to really doubt and wrestle with my own faith. And so I actually left the mission field for 6 years, from 2009 to 2015, and kind of walked away from the Lord for a while, and went on another roundabout journey and experienced a lot of hard knocks, and was really wrestling with this idea of, the gospel might be true, and Jesus might be real, and God, it might all be real, but it doesn't seem to work for me. And that was pretty depressing for me. Once you've tasted and had that relationship with God, and so I'm sure there's some of you guys that are watching this, and you're dealing with addiction issues or emotional, psychological issues, and you know what I mean. You want more than anything to maintain that connection with God, and you're scared and a little bit nervous that it's not going to last. And so I had to go on a journey, and luckily Sean Murphy was a big part of that journey in 2015, calling me and inviting me back into YWAM. I had been going to church by that point for like 6 months and kind of reconnecting with the Lord, and on a bit of a journey to see if I could walk it out again. And when I came back to staff, actually Connor and Lauren's DTS in 2015, it was a bit of a test of, am I going to be able to experience God in a way and understand the gospel in a way where the gospel is vital in my own life, and I can truly walk in freedom to the point where I can preach the gospel and believe that others can also experience the same freedom. Because there's nothing worse than preaching a gospel that you don't fully believe in. And so I am here to tell you guys that for the last 6 years, the walk I've had with God, His goodness, and the freedom I've experienced from serious, I don't know what some of you guys have gone through or are going through, but I mean, years of prescription opiate addiction, years of drinking, and a lot of internal emotional things that I really struggle with, depression, and different psychological stuff. 6 years now, you guys, I have walked in radical freedom, and it hasn't been all easy. I've had to do some serious work, but I believe fully in the process that God's led me in, that it'll work for you, and it can work for anyone if you're willing to put in the work. So that's a little bit about my story. Since then, obviously, 2015, staffing the DTS with Sean and at Ships, with Connor and Lauren, brought the team out here, pioneered in Phuket, Cambodia, and like Naomi said, 2.5 wonderful years ago, this beautiful woman came walking across the border, and it changed my life. And the base community here, we'll be able to share that with you guys and show you around the base a little bit. But yeah, that's our story, and that's a bit of our experience.
So we're now the base leaders of this base that Uriah pioneered 5 years ago with Lauren and Connor, who you will meet after this video is done. And yeah, we'll, as the week goes on, we'll break down some of the practicalities of what that looks like and more what we do. We're going to make a video and send you a few clips and things of, so you can kind of get a picture of our daily life and things that we do in the community and stuff. But yeah, so as you see with our testimonies, hopefully you're kind of beginning to form an idea of what we mean when we talk about the 4.0 and the felon. And again, we're working with stereotypes. Of course, not everyone is going to fit into one of these categories, but earlier today we were talking about we generally see ourselves in one of two different ways, and people usually see us in one of two different ways. You know, as we've been growing up, you know, as a teacher, I can tell you that as I look at a classroom, I can kind of name off the good kids. Oh, this kid is really, you know, smart and they work hard and they're easy to teach. And then you've got the other kids, you know, the ones that are difficult and the troublemakers, and you really got to discipline them or separate them and make sure, you know. And so teachers view classes in kind of these different categories. Often as we just approach different situations and stuff, there's different characteristics that we've begun to notice within these two groups. And so again, though we're not making it a theology, we have even noticed within the Bible that there are different characters who kind of fall into these two different groups. So we're just going to share some of our observations, again, to just encourage you and identify certain things that we really feel the Lord might want to highlight as you're looking at yourself and questioning, can the Lord really use me? Would God really use someone like me?
Yeah, so, I mean, first on the list, you can look at Moses, right? And, I mean, what a guy, what a stud, absolute leader and super used by the Lord. But you have to remember, he was a fugitive from justice, convicted murderer. This would be like a dude like Black Lives Matter goes and like kills some dude and then ran to Mexico, and then the Lord called him back and led the people out of America to Canada or something. I don't know. Like, it's like he, you know, it was a righteous justice that he killed the Egyptian, but he killed the guy. You know what I mean? Sometimes you forget about that.
He had a temper.
He's definitely got a temper. He hit the rock. He said, God said, speak to the rock, and he hit the rock. It didn't get fixed right away either, you know? So you can see right away, first example, Moses as a good example of what you might consider a felon. He literally was a felon who was wanted by the law, and yet God used him in a radical way.
But God partners him with, you know, Moses says, oh, I can't speak well. And so God partners him with Aaron. And now, while we don't know a ton about Aaron, we can kind of say that he probably fits more into this 4.0 category, where he had grown up with the family in that Hebrew setting, and a little bit more of the traditional path, you know, whereas Moses got taken to Pharaoh's household and grew up in the Egyptian thing. And God chooses Aaron to be the priestly line. And so we know that there was a model, an example, an anointing upon Aaron and his family and descendants that God really used. And so he becomes the spokesperson, the mouthpiece that's partnered with the leadership and the charisma, the zeal of Moses. But Aaron comes along to speak to the people. He often will act a little bit as a mediator because probably he's a little bit less scary than crazy Moses was sometimes. So that's just, again, some generalizations. Obviously, we only know a certain limited amount of what the Bible talks about Aaron. So he obviously wasn't perfect and stuff, but those are certain highlights that we can kind of see. Moses was this side, Aaron was probably a little bit on this side, but God brought them together to really use them to work in leadership.
Or another example, if you look at Paul. Paul, notorious troublemaker, very zealous though. So with both of these guys, we don't want you to think one is better than the other. That's not what we're saying. And we'll get into that in a little bit with strengths and weaknesses, because yeah, you see God using these people mightily on either side of how they're kind of oriented or wired. So with Paul, killing, being there at the stoning of Stephen, going around, rounding up and jailing, and sometimes apparently trying to kill Christians. We don't know if he actually physically killed or murdered any Christians, but he was a part of the group who was after Christians' lives. And so you can see kind of this fiery personality that, to the point of being willing to kind of be at least a manslaughter, like a witness to murder, and go along with it. And yet, again, God using him in radical ways.
And so God partners him again with Barnabas. And again, we don't know a ton about Barnabas, but his name means son of encouragement. And he goes, and everybody else, after Paul's conversion and stuff, everyone's scared to go to this man who was persecuting Christians and turning Christians in. And Barnabas goes and he brings him, and he willingly partners with him and works with him. And as we move through the book of Acts, we get little glimpses into his partnership with Paul. And we know that eventually they went their separate ways. And the reason they went their separate ways was because because Barnabas wanted to take John Mark with them. And Paul just said, that pansy, wouldn't stick with us. And he ran off, he went home, and, enough's enough. And I say, no, no second chances. And Barnabas said, no, we're going to take him. We'll work with him again, And we just see this really tender heart. And from different passages, we know that oftentimes Paul was the spokesperson. It kind of presents that Paul was like this zealot, but Barnabas was there, kind of coming alongside of him and kind of walking with him in a faithfulness and a consistency that is oftentimes a real strength and a characteristic that we often see in the 4.0s and stuff. So
the most popular of all the felons probably would be David. You mean, again, a murderer, adulterer, murderer, multiple times. He was, you think of Uriah, Uriah, the Hittite, not the life word. His wife, Bathsheba. I'm always leery when I meet David's. No, just joking. It's a bad joke. Dad joke. I can say those jokes now that I'm a dad. But even before Uriah, there was a time where he was guarding, what was his name?
Nabu or Nebu?
He's ready to kill this guy, and he ends up, the guy had a heart attack supposedly, but he grabs his wife too. Abigail, his first wife. Or no, his first wife was Saul's daughter.
Yes.
Yeah. But second wife, some dude's wife, you know what I mean? He's ready to go kill the guy for talking smack about, and he's basically kind of a little bit of a wild one. Yeah.
1 Samuel chapter 25.
1 Samuel chapter 25. Thank you. Nabal was going to go kill this guy and take his wife, pretty much. So, and then he does it again with Uriah and Bathsheba, and it's kind of the classic for us of this example of, man, he's definitely got a heart for the Lord, but he's definitely prone to failure. And I mean, anyone who's watched the news lately with Carl Lentz or other pastors, you can see this. Your passion and love for Jesus, even if you're a real charismatic type of person like David or Carl Lentz or whatever, you're also prone to failure. And so, yeah, that would be another example of kind of what we consider would be a felon, more of a felon kind of a person.
And so, like with all of the kings of Israel, God partners them with a 4.0, and that would be the prophet. And so one of the prophets during David's time that's very significant, particularly in bringing correction to David's sin with Bathsheba, is the prophet Nathan. And like I said, with all the kings of Israel, you'll always see that God's intention was for the king to be partnered with the prophet who would bring the word of God would bring the correction or the vision or the direction for the people. And so really kind of the 4.0 or the good person on that. And so, Nathan comes to David and speaks the word of the Lord to him, both in that time and then also when David has the heart to build God's temple. And so Nathan comes and brings God's instructions that it isn't David, but Solomon, who's meant David's son, who's supposed to build the temple. So again, we just see the partnership of these two working together.
Yeah.
And so, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say the strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, we really believe it's because each side has strengths and weaknesses that require us to work within team, which is one of our YWAM foundational values. And definitely for both Uriah and myself, who've been on the mission field for several years, we have seen the reason that this is one of YWAM's foundational values. Being alone is not good. Working in isolation is not healthy, and it never works out well. God created us for relationship and to work within teams, to recognize that we need each other. And so as we look, and again, why are we going through these different things? The reason is because we want to identify that there are some things that other people do better than us, but that is not a reason to disqualify ourselves. And interestingly enough, I think each of us use our weaknesses or things that we see, the strengths that we see in other people, the opposite side or other people, to try to disqualify or excuse ourselves. They should go, not me. God wouldn't use me. God would use someone like them. And again, like I said, I think we do it on both sides.
Yeah, there was a time right actually before I did leave missions in 2009, where I was hosting this amazing Bible college grad. He was like attending seminary, great family, kind of a total 4.0. And I was hosting him in this rural Bible college that I had helped start. And he had just, so connected to a church, and like I had no one supporting me. I had no, and I remember listening to him talking, and I'm like, man, this guy could totally handle this life. Because look, missions is difficult. We'll get into it this week, but it's not, we love doing it. We wouldn't do anything else for all the tea in China or whatever else. We love doing what we do, but it is very difficult. And you will experience times like Naomi's talking about where you're thinking, am I able to do this? Am I called and competent to do this? And you'll make excuses. And I was beginning to make excuses in that time. And I was like, my family, historical background of trauma, my tendency for chemical dependency, emotional and mental, problems, like I'm relationally challenged, like communication with people. I have so many reasons for not being a missionary. This guy, he should do what I'm doing. He's healthy, functional, like well-rounded young man. Let's have him do my job, and I should go back and go to church and have people take care of me. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, what am I doing out here? And that was a definite experience where I began to think that the way I am should mean that I shouldn't be the person involved in missions.
And then for me, I've always hated having to preach the gospel or share my testimony next to someone like this, because to me, Uriah is so much more qualified because of his experience. Whenever, like in my DTS, okay, who's, outreach time, who's going to share a testimony? This is the guy who should share his testimony, right? He's got the drugs and the jail, and he just has the tattoos. And he's so much more interesting to show the glory of God through his life. And then, he can relate to people, his life has been, he's had those experiences. And in all seriousness, I've always felt like he just seems to connect so easily with people. He talks so easily with people. And I often feel like almost a distance with people because whenever I'm with people who haven't had the sort of upbringing that I am, I find it a little bit harder to connect with them, or to find the right words to say, or to be able to be at ease, to be able to connect with them and stuff. And so in so many ways, I've often felt like people like Uriah make the perfect kind of missionary. So.
Yeah, but again, to reiterate our point, there's no excuses. Naomi has her gifts and her calling. I have my gifts and my calling, and they play really well together. And it's a real cool thing to do, is to be able to identify. We're out of time. Identify. So we're going to go over some of the strengths and weaknesses of the 4.0 and the felon. Again, sweeping generalizations here, you guys. But just some things that we've seen in ourselves. Connor and Lauren will be able to share with their own experience of how they are similar in this area, and many others that we've seen kind of fit into this category.
So one of the things that I've always admired about felons, or about people like Uriah, is their ability for vision and big picture. They have this zeal and this passion that's just larger than life. And they have, I honestly believe, like even a measure of faith often that I lacked, or at least admired so often, because they see big and they come in with an idea that is beyond just them. And I love that.
With the weakness on that, though, is you get lost in the details, or you just don't care about the details. And so, I mean, the classic thing with this is you'll see, the whole idea of a person wanting to become a drug dealer or some big thing is you're trying to take shortcuts sometimes in life. And if you've grown up in a good family, you know that shortcuts are never shortcuts. Sean says this really good, you guys. He always says, sometimes fast is slow, and sometimes slow is fast. And that's definitely true with the idea of don't always think so big that you forget about being faithful with little. And so that's one of the weaknesses of the felon type of the personality.
So another strength is that they're just charismatic. They often make really dynamic leaders because they're kind of naturally people that other people want to follow. We find ourselves drawn to them. They're cool. They seem to just kind of know what they're doing, what to say. And and so whether good or bad, they often are natural leaders and just charismatic and kind of leading in a direction. And while some of you might be saying, oh, well, my personality is more reserved or anything, I would even make the argument, though, even we've seen this, even in people who are more reserved or something, for some reason, they still tend to be people that kind of, even if they're more quiet, they kind of have a presence that other people follow. Maybe even just by them sitting in the back, or they'll cross their arms, or their absence of saying something kind of draws people along with them. Yeah, well, I'm not going to go either. I don't want to do it either. Or, there's quite a presence to them that other people follow and go along with.
Yeah, charismatic, for better or worse. Sometimes the worst. And one of the things that gives a felon, I think, that charisma is the highs and the lows of their emotional life. What we've seen discipling people who kind of are in this, or my experience of being like this, is when you're on, you're on. But when you're down, you're down. And in the turtle in the hair, we say in America, tortoise in the hair, of like, again, sometimes the less, I will put my money any day on a person who shows up and is consistent over the person who shows up and is charismatic and can have that natural talent. Because in the long run, it doesn't matter how charismatic you are. If you're a slave to your emotions, you won't go very far. Even though your emotions might get you the influence in the relationships around you, you've got to learn to control your emotions. So.
Mm-hmm. But a strength is that they are often recognized as having huge potential. And again, this is just kind of a phenomenon. As a 4.0, I used to hate it in like school and stuff, because people would literally say, the people who are the top of the class, those who are getting the A pluses today, 10, 15, 20 years from now, they're not going to be the CEOs of companies. They're not going to be the big leaders of things. It's going to be the people who dropped out of high school, or who didn't, maybe get the best grades. Because even back then, people recognized that often those other people who are not necessarily the top of the class or the goodies or who always do things right aren't necessarily the ones that have this natural gifting and talent. And even in the midst of their being troublemakers or whatever, people often recognize those are the ones with huge potential.
Huge potential, yes, but also very prone to failure. As you can see over and over and again with these dynamic and charismatic leaders or CEOs, sometimes they, embezzle millions of dollars or run off with a secretary, or just blow up the company. It's the Achilles heel of these huge potential people, is how many people are there who've had potential, so much potential, but it's unrealized potential. Usually, more often than not, although sometimes you get these amazing young people who, Jack Ma, I couldn't get into university, and now I started Alibaba, and I'm one of the richest men in the world, ha ha ha. Or Bill Gates, jumped out of college, but Bill Gates, total 4.0.
Yeah.
Anyways, but sometimes you get these kind of rebels, Steve Jobs or whatever. But I mean, even Steve Jobs went to a good college, but he dropped out or whatever, and took a bunch of drugs. So there are these types of people who kind of are rebels. I just finished the book A Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, who started Nike. And he was kind of a rebel kind of a guy. And there is something to YWAM. It kind of attracts a little bit of the rebel kind of a person. But yeah, prone to failure. And so again, the weakness and the strength, I love the saying, your greatest strength is always your greatest weakness. And so we'll go through the rest of these and be thinking, which one am I and which one do I relate with the most?
Mm-hmm. So another strength of this group of people is that they often are great people. They might not be the most academic. They're probably not into school or, just taking a class on something. They're much more interested in going and hands-on learning something from someone else. I just want to go and sit down with them. And these people make great missionaries because they don't need a book to tell them what to say or what to do. They kind of get into a new area or a new community, and their first instinct is, let's go hang out with people. Let's go hang out. Let's go make friends. And it's a quality I admire so much, because I would say it's probably one of the most necessary qualities within missions, is just this passion and love for being with people for lots of periods of time.
Yeah, but sometimes you hang out with people so much you forget to take care of tasks, and that's never good. You can be so people focused that you forget about just doing the necessary, responsible decisions that are necessary to make life sustainable and healthy. So it's, especially in a community, of an impoverished community, we're always relational. We're always down to hang out because we kind of avoid work. Do you know what I mean? I'll do my homework later. Let's hang out. And let's have a beer. Hey, I'll be your friend. And so there's a natural tendency, if you're highly relational like that, to sometimes slip into compromise and definitely avoid tasks that are necessary in life.
Mm-hmm. And so last, again, we could keep going with a long list of more and more qualities, but we just picked out a few so you can kind of get thinking about what we're highlighting here. But one more strength of the felons is that they have this kind of rebel, get it done attitude. Like, I don't care who tells me I can't do it. I'm gonna get it done. And I mean, it's an incredible confidence and just this grit that no matter how hard something is, no matter how many people have told them it's impossible, they have the willpower and the strength to just go out and make it happen.
Yeah, but the downside of that is you never want to get outside of the blessing and the protection of your authority. If you're a felon, if you're kind of on this side, the little more rebellious side of the Christian community or just the world in general, always remember that your leaders that God has placed around you love you and want the best for you. I've stepped out. I tell this to the people we disciple all the time. If you're a felon kind of person and you're a bit more rebellious, you need to make sure that you're walking under a clear level of authority, of structure. It's what protects you. It's like an umbrella that protects you from attacks from the enemy, and it's where your blessings come from. Mm-hmm. So resources and friends and finances and teams. And it's just so important, you guys. If you know yourself, I'm a little bit of that rebel, never, ever walk outside of the authority and the leadership that God has placed over you. Mm-hmm. Always walk in humility, always walk in teachability. Mm-hmm. So that's okay. So that's for the felon. Now let's get into the 4.0. Some general things. We're going to have a little Q&A for you guys at the end of this of which one of these most connects with you as an individual, and which ones that you kind of would like to work on or recognize as a strength. And so maybe write these down and make sure you remember them. All right, so for the strengths of what we call the 4.0s, or kind of the good person, faithful and consistent. If they say something is going to get done, it'll get done. It might not get done like rah, but it'll get done, and it'll get done well. And it'll be on time, and it'll be done well. And that's something that is like vital for a long-term successful ministry, marriage, life, parenting. Being faithful and being consistent will always, I think, win the day in the long run over anything else.
And yet, I hear so many times this used by generally 4.0s as an excuse of not to go, because they're not ready just yet. And because their heart is good in wanting to be faithful and well-equipped and well-prepared for whatever it is that they're stepping into, they are often reluctant to step out in faith or in boldness. Oh, I think I just need to do one more training. You know, a lot of times as 4.0s, we like the safety and the comfort of school. And well, maybe I just need another seminar. I need to attend another class. You know, there's just some more things that I really feel that I need to learn about so that I can be fully prepared and ready to go. And so don't let that quality become an excuse for not going.
Yeah, another thing that 4.0s are really great at is just their integrity. And this is something you see with Naomi, or I grew up with other people who had kind of that healthy, it's like an emotional fortitude within them that they can resist and say, no, that's okay. I'm not going to go to that party. No, that's okay. I'm not going to compromise on my boundaries, my sexual boundaries. No, that's okay. I don't want to smoke that. I don't want to do that. I'm not going to compromise on the areas of integrity that are vital and important to me. And that emotional fortitude around that integrity is super strength.
And yet, if you are someone like me, you know that, like Uriah said, kind of the dark side of the strength is that you start to feel pretty good about that. That's right, I've never done that. Never been there, never had that problem. That is one of the most dangerous phases. Oh, I don't have that problem. I just don't struggle with that thing. Because that is really just opening the door for an access point for the enemy to poke at what you have pridefully just concluded is not a problem for you. And so, though we may walk in great integrity, a lot of times pride easily sneaks in, or self-righteousness. We begin to do things, the right things, for the wrong reasons. Well, I don't do those things because this is my reputation. This is who I am. Who I am is just, I'm a good person, and I almost don't even need Jesus. I'm such a good person, like that's so dangerous. And then, of course, along with that goes a lot of judgment, because then we begin to compare ourselves. Well, I'm so much better than other people, or I'm doing it so much better. And it becomes our own, it can lead us astray even in its own way, as we begin to define for ourselves rather than the Word of God what is right and what is wrong. And can we just say, and we're going to talk about culture later on this week, but as you enter into a new culture, this is awful. That's great if you're a wonderful person and you have this strong sense of right and wrong. But if it is from a moral high ground and a pride and a superiority over other people, as you enter into another culture, it's just going to set you up for such failure, because you will be so limited or even hindered from truly learning that other people see things differently than you do. And while, yes, there is a right and a wrong, the Bible was actually written in a culture that's completely different from yours. And so seeing that as right and wrong within culture is a whole new dimension that you'll miss out on if you purely walk into it with the superiority of, I'm right, everyone else is wrong, it's all black and white.
So another strength will be the detailedness, like their ability to attention to the detail. With YWAM being so focused on being visionary, if you don't have detailed people, none of the vision will actually happen. And this is so important to gather and have a community of people who are 4.0s, kind of these good people. Your gift to bring to the table of adding value to your team through dealing and handling the seemingly small tasks of good communication with people, of timely reports and submitting things and handling finances really well, and just walking above the board and everything is absolutely vital. And it's something the 4.0s bring a whole level of detail-oriented focus to making the mission possible. It's a real strength for the 4.0s.
But again, we want to make sure that we don't allow that to become an excuse for us to stay within our comfort zone. I am so much more comfortable sitting and doing data entry than maybe pushing myself to practice speaking in another language, or getting up in front of people to talk in a language that I'm not very comfortable in, or just getting outside of my comfort zone. And that's something that often 4.0s, because we know what we're good at, and it's appreciated and needed, and so we're not minimizing that, but we're just saying, don't let that cap what God may be asking you to. And God is always asking us to trust Him and step out of the boat, to be bold and go beyond what our giftings and talents are, so that His glory can shine through us in our weaknesses. And so we never want to let ourselves just become minimized in, well, I'm going to just stay here. Why don't those other ones go, because I'm really good at the stuff behind the scenes. I'm really good. And then also along with that, we often find ourselves comparing ourselves a lot. And it's a funny thing, because the last point I just shared, how quickly we elevate ourselves in superiority, in our, morals and integrity, looking down on other people. But then at the same time, we often will elevate other people over ourselves, and wow, they speak so much better, connect so much better, they have so much more experience than I do. I could never do those things. I'm just from a small town in a good family. What do I know about connecting with those people? So just the comparison and limiting ourselves to stay within a comfort zone.
Yeah. So another thing we're really great at is submitting to authority. So everywhere we go, all of Naomi's pastors, leaders, elders internationally, everyone loves Naomi. Me, on the other hand, there's Sean Murphy loves me, okay? Sean Murphy loves me.
And isn't that all that's really important?
Do I need anyone
And
else's
Eleanor.
approval?
Eleanor,
you love me. Thank you, Eleanor. Brett and Karen, they love me. So I feel like I'm okay most of the time. But sorry, it says about me. But no, everywhere Naomi goes, and 4.0s, you know, whether it's principals, the police, parents, pastors, people in authority usually really love, and it's a great thing, and they're blessed with a radical blessing because of it, with this relationship with authority that they have.
But within submission to authority, which is so important, we always want to be careful that we're not allowing other people to define or be the voice of the Lord for us. As submission is important to us as 4.0s, sometimes it crosses over into people pleasing. Well, this is what my mother and father want. Well, my pastor is really expecting me to come home to the church to help in children's ministry. This is, my leader told me that I should do this, so I just, I'm going to just go along and do what they're telling me to do, as opposed to really hearing what the Lord is asking of them and stepping out. Again, a lot of times we abdicate our responsibility in following the Lord, as we kind of give that responsibility to others. And so it's interesting because you see, and one of the reasons we're laying out some of these strengths and weaknesses is because we call it leaning into, right? So it's important for us to recognize where we're at, because you may have to lean the opposite way that somebody else needs to. And so for a felon, you probably need to lean into listening to your leader. If your leader is telling you you're not ready to go, you need to, fulfill this, you need to be faithful in this, you need to complete this, you probably need to lean into listening to them and following through with what your leader is asking you with authority and submitting to that. If you're a 4.0, you might need to lean the other way, not in rebellion or throwing that off, but chances are you probably need to step out and really just evaluate what God is asking of you. And again, a lot of this message has been prepared around the primary excuses that we hear from people not stepping into missions. Well, my parents want me to finish college. Well, my mom and dad want me to get a good job. Well, this person is expecting this from me, or I need to do this, or I don't want to let this person down. And again, we're not advocating for rebellion and just do your own thing, but we are wanting to really encourage you to make sure that you're hearing God and not just doing things out of a motivation to please others or, for other people's benefit, and not from what God is calling you to do.
Yeah, finally, there's so many strengths. I could do this all day, actually. But most 4.0s have a real value for tradition and for the way things have been done, the way things our parents did, the way things our leaders did things, and really valuing that. And it can be a really beautiful thing. As Darlene Cunningham will say, don't mess with the DTS. And there's something to aligning yourself with the values. Darlene's book just came out, Values Matter. Promo. Got you, Dar. There is something really powerful about aligning yourself with the values and the traditions that have been handed to you from your fathers. The Bible says it's the first promise that comes with the blessing, or the first commandment that comes with the blessing is honor thy father and mother, and it go well with you. Mm-hmm. And so there's a blessing that comes when you honor traditions and family.
And yet we just want to be careful that we don't allow those things to limit our creativity and the vision that God might want to be giving you. I think for myself as a 4.0, and again, this might not be for all of you. Some of you might be real creatives and things. But often, instead of looking for a new way to do something, I'm prone to just do it the way that it's always been done before. And oftentimes that really hinders new experience or creativity or an innovation that is necessary as we move into missions or new things. And God is a creator God, and a God who is doing a new work, continually moving. And it's something that within YWAM we really champion as well, which is wonderful, is doing things in a new way to impact and reach others that are not yet reached. And so as a 4.0, we just want to stretch ourselves and step out of the comfort zone again of, well, this is the way that we've always done it, or this is the way that I've seen it done, so I'm just going to do it in the same way. I think sometimes it's almost a little bit of a laziness of, the laziness and a comfort of just, well, I know how to do this, and this is safe, and this is comfortable, rather than, well, I'm going to really trust the Lord and do it in a new way, whether it succeeds or fails. I've sought the Lord, and I'm going to try it.
Yeah, so that's all we have for the strengths and the weaknesses of 4.0s and felons. Hopefully that'll help you kind of place yourself more easily, like, oh, I can see myself kind of being on this way, and I can see myself kind of being this way. And some of you guys are going to be like, well, I see myself in both. And that's fine as well. We're not trying to put you in a box. We're just trying to help you identify certain God-given characteristics that are maybe within you that if cultivated can bring greater fruit, but if neglected or just left to their own desires, can really bring or limit at least the effectiveness and the calling that God would have in missions. And like Naomi said, especially, we don't want you to ever think there's an excuse why you can't not only be a sender, but a goer. Because none of us want to be the disobedient ones, right?
So recognizing these things should also be an encouragement for you of what you can work on. Wow, yeah, I do notice that I like to be in my comfort zone. I like to be in the traditional formatted way. Well, maybe the Lord is asking you to step out and to branch out.
Or if you're on the other end where you're like, I don't ever want to do something the same way twice. Let's just reinvent the wheel all the time, and I'm bored with that. Let's move on to something new. And I know we started this project and we hadn't finished it, but I want to start a new project because, that one's boring. Maybe you need to finish something and finish it well before you just move on to the next project.
Yeah. So hopefully these things are challenging you, not only to not have excuses, but of things that you can work on, and also to be valuing and appreciating those around you that are different. Because especially as you head into outreach, there's going to be challenges, particularly with those who are most different from you. And so it's important to recognize the giftings that are within them. And even if you know some of their weaknesses, you can help not change them, but just be aware of that weakness also probably is a strength. And how can you bless and speak and encourage that strength within them?
Yeah, we see that in YWAM there's a real anointing upon this walking out in good relationship between the 4.0, the good kind of person, and then the felon, kind of that rough, a little bit a person. We actually made a list of several missionaries that we were going to share, but we thought, you know what, the easiest way, since you guys have all read, is that really you, God, and you know the story. Hopefully you remember the story of Kalafi Mawala, who I actually just met for the first time a couple of years ago, last year. Naomi and I got a chance to meet him. And of course, Lauren and Darlene, and how God led them on the journey of starting YWAM. Interestingly enough, Kalafi Mawala actually stayed with Naomi, your family's house, for a while, right? And there's some history there. But if there's one person I can kind of relate to, he's the guy in the book, the wild Tongan, not Samoan. I've got that confused before. From Tonga, just so passionate with the Lord. Lauren and Darlene hadn't really seen YWAM grow to the extent they felt that it was going to grow to. And they were praying and fasting in New Zealand when they met Kalafi. And then they did that outreach. If you guys look in your book, they did an outreach and saw God really begin to move through Kalafi, who, as you'll see later on in the book, with it, he's the guy who Lauren eventually flew to California to try and reconcile the marriage. And the marriage had fallen apart. And then Kalafi came back to Kona for a while and eventually rejoined YWAM. And the time he rejoined YWAM, he pioneered YWAM Honolulu, YWAM Japan, YWAM Singapore. And then Honolulu went on, and Singapore went on, and Japan went on to pioneer into several other locations. And so you can see such fruit and multiplication from Kalafi. But sadly, again, it's not in the book, but that second marriage also didn't work out. And so he's just, he's back in ministry. He's serving in his community, and he's walking with the Lord again. But man, if you can keep the relationship tight, the Lauren and Darlene, 30-minute timer, the Lauren and Darlene 4.0, the Naomi 4.0, and you can keep it tight with that Kalafi Moala, Uriah, some of you guys, partnership. I was so close. Partnership. You can see great things for the kingdom happen. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's all we have for today, right?
Do we give them the discussion questions, or Lauren and Connor do?
We could throw them out. It'd be funny.
Okay.
Partnership. 4.0's felons. Oh, we would want to talk about the prodigal son?
I thought we were going to do it tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Okay. So, hope you guys have enjoyed this first session. Connor and Lauren are going to unpack this for you a little bit, have some questions, Q&A time, as well as they're also similar on the spectrum as Naomi and I. Connor, when he came to do his DTS, they had a little chat thing, and in his profile, I was going to talk to him. He was the first person to comment on the, DTS 2015 January ships page, and his profile was like a Corona beer bottle on the back of a boat as he's wakeboarding, and I was like, oh, this guy's gonna be fun. And Lauren, you'll see, she's just amazing too. So they'll be able to unpack some of this stuff for you. We love you guys. We love any young person who's going after Jesus and wants to know more about who he is, and we connect and relate to that, and are just so proud to be a part of this YWAM family and grateful to share with you guys. So blessings. Prayer. Should we pray?
Sure.
Okay, you want to pray?
Sure.
Yeah, you pray.
Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this time. We thank you for your word, and we just pray that you would water the seeds that have been planted, Lord, that our words that have gone out, Lord, if it's not from you, you let it fall to the ground, but if it is from you, would you strike iron, Lord, and would you just pierce the hearts of your children, Lord God, and just touch them and bring to mind things that you would desire to challenge, correct, inspire, Lord. And we just thank you for, our brothers and sisters as they are here to know you and to make you known. So we thank you and just pray your blessing on the rest of their day. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.